The Darius series is one of the most popular arcade side-scrolling shoot-'em-ups. It started way back when Taito released the original Darius into arcades in 1989. Much like the Gradius series, or later R-Type, you pilot a single vessel against oncoming enemies, utilizing ship power-ups until you reach a very large boss at the end of each stage. Darius and its sequels are unique in that instead of generic ships and enemies, the world of Darius is populated with all forms of robotic sea life. Fishes, squids, octopus, all sorts of neat undersea creatures are your adversary in this game. Released in 1994, I happened upon Darius Gaiden's Silverhawk one day and decided to give it a chance. Yes, it's Gaiden, just watch the wizard if you're not sure, it's not Gaiden.
We're playing Ninja Gaiden! Hey!
Which we all thought back in the day from Ninja Gaiden.
We're playing Ninja Gaiden! Hey!
It ended up becoming one of my favorites. Now, the Darius series is very vast, with a new game in the series, Darius Burst, just released for the PSP in 2009. But let's not get off track and focus on my favorite of the series. Because of the silly and somewhat expected use of English in the opening, I'll attempt to translate the story as best I can. The intro tells of how our intrepid two pilots, Proko and Tiat, move on to find another adventure after the events of the last game, leaving the quote Death Star known as Darius behind them, as well as any survivors leaving the planet as well. They are all headed to a new planet called Vadis. Now, years later, the natives of Darius attempt to return to the planet. Their burgeoning colony gets annihilated by an unknown enemy, and your squadron of Silverhawks are almost totally destroyed as well. You begin on the surface of Darius and begin your adventure. The Darius series features the same power-up system that Gradius does. Also, notice how if you remove the G in Gradius, the remaining letters spell Darius, with each successive icon collected powering up either your firepower, missiles, or defensive shielding. There is also another secondary icon, but that's used just for scoring, and they're hidden within each level. As I stated before, the majority of enemies you face in the game are based on sea creatures, and you can see the terrific design work done by Taito in converting normal animals into crazy, evil-looking cybernetic baddies. For the most part, the bullet patterns aren't too intense. The graphics are great for the time, with all sorts of nice parallax scrolling and an incredible sense of depth. Lastly, you're given 3 gravity bombs, as I call them, which, like any other bomb in a shooter game, blows up everything on the screen. However, in this game, when detonated, they suck in everything before unleashing a massive electrical burst of energy. If your ears are working correctly, you should pick up the amazing soundtrack in the background. It's also one of my favorites, and the amount of score work in this game is incredible. The soundtrack was composed by Taito regular Zentada. The soaring synths, the large amount of chorus work, and the scope of the music is fantastic and very haunting at the same time. You reach the end of the first stage and you encounter the Golden Ogre. Yeah, every boss in this game has a unique name, and just like the normal enemies, they're all patterned from real sea life, which I think just kicks ass. The level of detail in the bosses and in their movements is incredible. Even the slight way he sways back and forth like a real fish. Anyways, you shoot the shit out of him and are instantly transported to the next zone, Zone B. This is the only time in the game that this happens, because for the remainder, once you complete a stage, you're taken to the zone selection screen, which also happens to feature my favorite musical piece in the game, and the phrase, rushing into zone, fill in the blank. Here you realize the massive scale of the game, and the large amount of variations that are possible in gameplay utilizing this type of level progression. Which path you choose is up to you. I haven't even come close to playing the majority of progression paths yet, but if you want the true ending, you'd want to choose a path that ends up on X if that isn't too hard to figure out. I recommend playing every stage at least once, just to see the great boss designs and variations, including Folding Fan, Neon Light Illusion, Titanic Lance from Zone M, where the whole stage is just fighting the humongous boss, and Deadly Crescent. At the end of Zone X, you face off against Hysteric Empress, a giant cybernetic king crab. I always wondered, let's see how the guys from Deadliest Catch would face off against this huge bitch. At the end, we're treated to another English sequence, describing how the enemy fortress crashed and sank underneath the clouds, and everything looks pretty. However, as the last line of the epilogue states, the battle didn't end yet. You watch the credit sequence, again, listen to the music, and if you pay attention to the top of the screen, the game actually shows you the levels you selected in order to finish the game, which I think is a neat idea by Taito. Darius Gaiden Silverhawk is a very special game, as it's its own complete universe tucked into a single adventure. Just watching the credits, it really gives you a sense of scale, of the size of the universe, and the scope of what you've just accomplished. You really feel like the Darius universe actually exists somewhere, and if you went there, you just might run into Golden Ogre as he's swimming about in the dark reaches of space somewhere. Now, Darius Gaiden was ported to the Sega Saturn and PlayStation in the mid to late 90s, but good luck trying to track down those. Unfortunately, really the only way left to play it, unless you have the original PCB, is in MAME. I've played all the other games in the Darius series, including G-Darius, which was the last game in the series to be released in arcade form, and none of them really match the fun, vastness, and overall enjoyment that I find in Darius Gaiden. Thanks for watching.